Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Rudy Page, and welcome to our World Intellectual Property Day series of dialogues. I'm so pleased that we now have Carol Newman from Jamaica. Dr. Laura is here again with us. And I'd just like to repeat, intellectual property refers to creations of the mind, inventions, literary and artistic works and symbols, names, images and designs used in commerce. And our case study for this session, our third and last session, is Jamaica. So you're going to hear all things Jamaica and what that means for the world. Dr. Carol Newman.
Ooh, speak it into being. Speak it into being.
I've decided to promote you because I've heard so much about you and your prowess in this field.
Oh, Lord.
So I know you're going to live up to it. But Carol, great that you've been able to come onto our platform today. And it's good to meet you.
Thank you very much for having me, Rudy. It's my absolute pleasure for being here.
Thank you. So Carol, tell us a bit about yourself and your background, if everything.
Okay, so my background is in management, but by mere happenstance, I entered into the world of intellectual property and the cultural and creative industries about 23 years ago. And so for the last 23 years, that has been my life. Particularly in the copyright area. I led the National Collective Management Organization here in Jamaica that supports creatives in the literary and artistic fields. And so I led that organization for the last one, opened the doors actually back in 1999, and saw that organization over the last 23 years provide, and that organization basically provided guidance, education and training, as well as licenses, helping persons who operate in the text and images space to manage the copyright in their creations. So that's what I've been doing mostly, but I've also been exposed and involved in other areas of intellectual property. I'm a tutor for the World Intellectual Property Organization's Academy. So I do tutor some courses in copyright and related rights at varying levels. I also operate a consultancy, the IP Bridge, which is a full house consultancy providing management consultancy as well as intellectual property advisory, giving advice and giving support to persons in the creative space, intellectual asset management, and that whole jazz. So that is basically what I've been doing. Along the way, I have served on various boards currently for the last 2 years, and again appointed to the advisory board of the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Also served on the National Commission for UNESCO. Also did the National Library. I'm involved with National Library there as well. In fact, I had a meeting this morning with National Library. So I've been in the space, operating in this space for some time. Okay. And this has become my life.
Right. So having said all that, how does Jamaica celebrate this day, World Intellectual Property Day?
Well, I tell you something. Jamaica does not just, Jamaica, when we do things, we go large, right? Mm-hmm. So whilst the world is celebrating Intellectual Property Day, Jamaica celebrates Intellectual Property Week, can I tell you? Okay. Yeah, I see your mouth, Dr. Laura.
Well, we're going to do that from next year now that you said.
So we do, and this is not just now. For as long as I've been involved in this space, we have celebrated Intellectual Property Week, and it usually straddles in World Book Day, the UNESCO Day, which is April 23. So it usually starts round about then and goes on for the week. So it includes World Book Day and it includes Intellectual Property Day. So a full week of activities. And so it usually involves a church service. There was a national church service on Sunday. There are various activities happening today. In fact, right now, there is an afternoon session going on put on by JIPO, the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, is having their award ceremony for their essay competition and launching as well the next essay competition and the patent competition as well. So we go large. One entire week of activities, and the activities are not restricted to or organized by the Intellectual Property Office, but organizations that operate in the creative space also have their own events as well. So yeah, it's a big deal, as we say.
Excellent, and we've learned something today, and you will see next year that we will have a week of activity as well.
Awesome.
And what we'll do, we'll align the activities between the UK and Jamaica.
Now, how's that?
And I think part 2 of this dialogue, we'll talk about this again, collaboration, across international borders in that space. That's the metaverse, as we've been talking about today. So we will have part 2. So excellent. And so how important is IP to Jamaica's creative economy and the wider economy, of course?
Like most places, it is very important, but more so for us. Jamaica is one of the most creative spaces. We are one of the most creative nations. And so, by extension, our creativity, our innovations, whatever it is that we conjure up in our minds, we find a space to make it an economic activity, thereby contributing to our economic development. And generally, the whole business of copyright, for example, contributes worldwide to development of nations. It contributes to not only our economic development, but also our social and our cultural development as well. Our stories, our art, all of that is embodied. It has a copyright culture. It has a copyright element. And as such, all of that, in one way or another, ends up in our national GDP. And so, for example, back in 2007, a study was commissioned by the Intellectual Property Office, JIPO, with the assistance of WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is the UN specialized agency for intellectual property. And WIPO does a lot of work in developing countries, and they do quite a bit of work in the Caribbean and in Jamaica. And this study that was done in 2007 by Dr. Vanus James at the time found that the contribution of just the copyright-based industries, the literature, dramatic works, the artistic works, fashion, food, color, all of the copyright-related aspects, contributed a whopping 4.8% to GDP. At the time, it was just fascinating because when you looked into the study, you realized that 4.8% contribution was, if you know anything about Jamaica and our cultural space here, not an overwhelming amount of support, of input, goes in from government, right? But of course, our agriculture gets quite a bit of inputs from government through subsidies and other supports. And the startling revelation was that both the copyright-based industries and agriculture, with all the inputs, contributed about the same to GDP.
amazing.
That was amazing. That was just out of this world information.
Yeah.
And so that was 2007. And then, but more recently, there was a mapping of our cultural and creative industries by the British Council in association with the JBDC, the Jamaica Business Development Council. And that study told us that there was some, at the time, I think it's 5.2% is the contribution of the cultural and creative industries. Now, bear in mind that we're talking today about intellectual property, which spans patents and trademarks and geographical indications and all of those wonderful, nice things. But this contribution is just from copyright. Just from copyright. And it is interesting because, as I said, not much inputs are made into this particular sector. It's just raw talent.
Yeah. So the return
so
on the investment, the return on that talent, if the investment went in.
Right. Can you just begin?
Yeah.
You're talking earlier on about 2093. Can you imagine?
Exactly. And I remember reading Jamaica's cultural policy 2008, which is the one that's all stuck in my mind, and towards a cultural super state. And so you can see the continuity from those facts into that cultural policy.
Absolutely. And there is quite a bit going on in that space as well, even as we speak, because we are looking now at, and this is being led by Minister Babsy Grange, through the ministry that she has, the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, with the assistance of UNESCO. There's a facility that they are assisting developing countries and South countries in developing the infrastructure for the cultural and creative industries. So revising, looking at a national cultural and creative industries policy, which should ultimately lead to an act, to legislation that is now being actively pursued. There's a national work group that has been established. There are subcommittees. I'm working with that project as well, looking to implement a national creative industries, creative and cultural and creative industries policy, as well as legislation to guide and also to try and kind of coordinate, because there's kind of a splintered approach right now. For example, intellectual property is in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and that is because of the view taken by government that of the economic implications and the economic contributions of intellectual property as driver of growth and an economic engine and all of that. And so that's where the whole intellectual property legislation, that whole regime falls under the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. And then there's the Ministry of Culture, which has a whole other set of responsibilities. But it is that ministry now which is driving this particular creative economy act, trying to coordinate. It has to.
It's the central driver. Progression and potential.
Absolutely. And so Minister Grange is very focused on this and trying to get this done. In fact, we're given a deadline which is fast approaching. But a lot of focus is now being put in that direction.
So, having said that, so generally, where do you see Jamaica kind of positioned in the world IP space? You've touched on the infrastructure development relative to its size.
It's interesting that you asked that question, because I saw something and it spoke to the contribution of Jamaica and what it does in terms of our whole cultural content that we generate. And I'm going to come back to it in terms of what what we put out in relative comparison to our small size. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I'm looking for it as I speak to you. And I'll come back to it as soon as I'll lay my hands on it. And I'm going to. So this is an excerpt from the report the study that was done by the British Council in partnership with the JBDC. And it said that Jamaica ranks 72nd in global creativity, outperforming Peru, Argentina, Dominican Republic, and Trinidad. On the Creative Output Subindex, Jamaica ranked 42nd, outperforming its neighbors Mexico, Costa Rica, and Panama. Now, when I saw it, all I can say is, wow.
Yeah, and look at the size of those populations.
And look at the size, exactly.
This is the thing.
It's awesome. We are sitting on a virtual gold mine.
Yeah.
A virtual gold mine. But coming back to your question, though, about where Jamaica stands, apart from our cultural input, and just in terms of the intellectual property space, Jamaica is regarded as one of those progressive countries when it comes to intellectual property. A lot has happened in the last 20 years. It started with a Modern Copyright Act, which came into being in 2004, and that was amended in 2015. With that amendment came the extension of the duration of copyright. So we are one of perhaps 2 countries in the world with copyright duration for 95 years. That was like earth-breaking, earth-shattering. Most countries settle around 70 years. Some are still at 50. We were at 50, and we went from 50 to 95 years. And at the time, there was quite a discussion around that. But the thinking at the time was that Jamaica needed some time to catch up in exploiting and recovering from its exploitation of its creative juices, all the creative outputs that we have, because we needed some time to catch up. And so hence the duration of copyright in Jamaica to lifetime plus 95 years. So which means that children and children's children and several generations in the future can continue to benefit from the creations of their and it becomes generational wealth.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Generational wealth.
Also, the distribution systems, it builds up the supply chain, collaboration across the sectors and clusters. I mean, it's so important.
Yeah, and that's in relation to copyright. Just a few months ago, we passed a new Trademark Act also, and that has been in the making for several years. So that's also a fabulous thing that has happened. We've also now adopted the Magic Protocol, which helps business persons and persons who are wanting to operate in several spaces. So we have a Trademarks Act here, which has now been modernized. You want to file a trademark, you can do it here in Jamaica. But many persons, if you're operating in the US, you're operating in the UK, you're operating in Shanghai, you want the ease of being able to make one registration.
Yeah, one-stop shop.
One-stop shop. You don't want to have to file in Jamaica, then you go to your filing, you have to find a lawyer to do it for in Shanghai, want to do it in the UK, you have to find somewhere else to do it in South Africa. What the Madrid Protocol provides, so that Jamaica has not implemented it, is that you can go to Jaipur and you can do that one application, one place, and it includes the various countries that you would have selected.
And that's an excellent point, because if we're now talking about business support.
Absolutely.
And the fundamental purpose of business support is to provide support where individuals and companies can be the most competitive.
That's right.
Even we're now talking about knowledge and creativity is the economic value driver going forward, and where we are. That's really important.
Yes. We also modernized the Patents and Design Act. We we were operating under an old act of 1857. And
oh dear, anything to do with the 19th century.
And that was recently sort of a very new act in 2020 was passed. Of course, we have had the Geographical Indications Act, Protection of Geographical Indications Act, that has been around for a while, and that was, I think it was 2004, but that was amended in 2018, so that is fairly current as well. There is work has been going on. There's no international norm in place in terms of structure for the protection of traditional knowledge, cultural expressions, and genetic resources. But work has been going on for several years in that regard, with a view to implementing as well some kind of infrastructure to protect all the knowledge that and our communities that is particular to our indigenous communities, or Maroons, or Rastafari, all of that, and trying to protect, because there have been several stories I've heard. I've been in several meetings and conferences and hearing about foreigners coming into the country, going up into the hills, interviewing persons in the Maroon community and other communities about herbs, plants, medicinal uses, and then you see this information in some publications which we have to turn around and buy, because we never did anything about it, and we were not able to protect it. And so this work has been going on for a while, and it falls under the purview of JIPO as well. So yes, just to say, a lot is going on. We have made tremendous strides in the IP infrastructure. We have collective societies here in Jamaica which help our musicians, our writers, our publishers to track down royalties for them, which is sitting in various countries. So a lot has happened. Of course, there's always room for improvement. We still have a long way to go, but we have made significant strides.
But the intention is there. And I think, as you mentioned, well, we will probably later on in the year, or maybe even July, because, of course, there's two things there. There's traditional knowledge, which we haven't really said much about traditional knowledge today, which we certainly will do. And, of course, in 1st of July, International Reggae Day, that's obviously UNESCO recognised, etc., etc.
Yes.
So I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So, are there any initiatives aimed at maximising Jamaicans and Jamaicans' ability to earn in the cultural and creative industry?
Yes. The fact I just alluded to two earlier. One is the collective societies that have been established under the Copyright Act. So these organizations have been set up by the creators themselves and publishers, and these agencies assist the rights holders to manage aspects of their copyright. And so it allows inflows of revenue for them wherever their works are used overseas and locally. And these agencies have been around. So Jam Copy, there's Jam Copy, there is JCAP, there's Jam Copy for writers, for visual artists, for publishers. There is JCAP for songwriters and music publishers, and those are the two older ones. And then there is JAMS, which is for music producers. And these organizations have agreements with similar organizations in other countries. And through that network and through those arrangements, there are inflows to our creators in Jamaica.
Particularly the UK, of course.
Well, I'll tell you a story. When Jam Copy was set up back in 1999, I remember receiving an email from the agency in the UK at the time, the Authors Licensing and Copyright Society. And I got an email from them because we entered into a bilateral agreement with them. for the share to allow us enable Jamaica to be able to manage the rights of UK British writers and publishers, and similarly they would do the same in Britain. And I remember getting this email being sent to me with a list of Caribbean writers, not only Jamaican writers, because their time assumed that the agency was representing Caribbean-wide writers. And on that list were some of our most prestigious writers. And the reason for contacting us was because there was money sitting down in the UK. Yeah, there was money sitting down in the UK for our writers. And so they contacted us because of how the system is set up, and you can appreciate it would have been difficult for them in some instances to be able to track down some individual authors. But now that there was an agency established for this purpose, they reached out to the agency and was able to remit some serious pound sterling to many of our creators. And so that is one, and that has continued to happen over the years. But that is one important way that our creators or creatives operating in the space are able to benefit. I alluded also earlier to the fact that a lot of work is now being done on implementing a Creative Economy Act. And that will go a far way as well in terms of just the coordination and the harmonization that is required, even just between ministries and departments, to enable our creatives to function, and for that infrastructure to support them and be able to help them, to empower them, and enable them to just harness all that exists.
It's an institution on its own, but I won't get into. Okay, thanks for that, Carol. Great overview. I'm now going to bring in Dr. Laura to have a dialogue with you. First of all, Laura, just to give your perspective on what much of what Carol has been able to share with us.
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to meet you, Ms. Newman. So much of my doctoral dissertation was about global copyright as it relates to music and marketing music and the distribution of music. When I was working on this study, I discovered that there was an issue with the countries communicating financially. So there was no communication. You know, there are some things happening in the field of accounting and that sort of thing, and I believe blockchain and Bitcoin has bypassed that discussion now, and people are now communicating that way while they're still trying to figure out how they're going to communicate. So one of my study was almost on the distribution, the global distribution of royalties. Once I realized that these folks were not in any time soon trying to communicate to each other financially, and I ended up having to go to Leeds University during the process to discover that some of our folks were sending money for researchers in other countries to do what they need to do while they are positioning themselves by buying off these little small software companies, acting like they have a footprint. And so yes, I am saying that we are one of the bandits that go into. It's a known fact, so it's not anything of a surprise. It's documented in literature.
It is a competitive market.
It is a competitive market, and that is what it is. My point is, I shifted the discussion to distribution systems because distribution systems were speaking back then. What you are saying to me now is not only historical for IP Day and for World IP Day, but the fact that people can do global trademark and patent registrations there instead of doing one in, say, in the States, and then you have to go somewhere else to do a global one. It's almost like, where do I sign? And number one, number two, are you, is the agency open already to blockchain technology, or are they receiving other currencies to get the transaction to happen? The reason I'm asking this is because I know quite a few game developers that once they distribute their games, it's going global. But are the patents, are they held globally? Do you see what I'm saying? So once this game, or once whatever they're making leaves the shores, which that happens in a nanosecond with distribution systems now, does that mean that in Thailand that they're going to honor the copyright of the trademark of the items that has been created? And I can tell you, with a U.S. patent and a U.S. trademark, it's not going to be honored because they have no obligation to do that. They don't have, in fact, in order to do business in other countries, you have to relinquish some of your rights, as in some countries, not all of them. So you have to relinquish your rights to, you have to, in other words, the code has to be open for other countries. So bottom line, the marketing piece that I see here in what you've mentioned is the fact that your organization, probably spearheaded by you and a team of people like you, are going to not only honor but protect the creatives in this space. That's not only attractive for people in Jamaica, that's attractive for people everywhere. That's a huge...
So that means it has an economic value then?
Absolutely.
Within this...
Huge. It's a currency.
That's the currency.
It's a huge currency. It's something that people are going to have to figure out now how they're going to maintain their nationwide business of trademark and patent alone, and even copyright. Because if it's only honored within the country that you're in, and we are already in a global space, and most people have moved or are moving to Web3, then blockchain is going to easily verify that this particular trademark or patent is only, valid in the States, and it gives people legal right to take what it is that you've designed, because you didn't take the time to protect yourself globally. So I am loving this discussion. I am loving you. I wish I could reach out and just squeeze you and say thank you, because it just, it just takes some thinking. I'm gonna say one other thing too. One of the first things that happens now on this side, when people talk about, I'm going to create a game, I'm going to create something, it's going to be an NFT, it's going to be on OpenSea or something of that nature, or it's going to be distributed. One of the first things that people say, well, do you have an attorney? And it's like, yeah, but your attorney is not globally licensed. So getting an attorney, that's good. You need to do that, but if you're planning to distribute globally, you might need to have a global conversation with somebody that deals with things so you can get a proper global footprint for whatever you're intending to distribute globally. And that may speaks to everybody that's already distributed things globally. Okay. So I'm very ecstatic. I'm very, very ecstatic. I would love to, and you mentioned the key. I took down a lot of words that you said, but you mentioned virtual gold mine. And I'm taking the word virtual to really mean virtual. So I applaud your efforts. I think this is just wonderful. This is just like another level. It shows that people that are in this space that have been researching this, it wasn't in vain. Somebody's actually paying attention. And the fact that somebody's paying attention in my backyard, please. I'm rather ecstatic and just about sold. Yeah, it's almost like, I don't want to publish anything else yet. Let me just send it, send it home, and then I'm covered. Just anyways. But that's just a strategy. No one has to follow. No one has to do whatever I'm talking about. But I'm ready for like your email, the zip codes information. I just post it on the screen. Tell me where I need to sign. Just 'cause that's where this is.
Excellent. So Carol, over to you.
Yeah.
Come to near the end of the program.
Yeah.
So Carol, over to you.
Well, I just want to say it was really a privilege being here. We are trying here in Jamaica, endeavoring to ensure that our creatives operating in the creative space are empowered, that that they're enabled to just navigate this space, and that's what the IP Bridge, my consultancy, is about. Just helping to empower creatives and organizations that support creatives to help them to navigate this the creative space, because we know there are several challenges, there are several hurdles just going from one place to the other. You just highlighted some of those challenges, Dr. Laura, and just helping persons to move from one place to the other. Our motto is crossing over to endless possibilities, because once you cross over, it's the world. The world becomes your stage, and as you said, virtual. And I'm taking that for you now. A virtual gold mine, and that's what we're about. Just empowerment, and for us, we believe it starts with education and training. Just ensuring that persons understand what it is that they own and how they can use that creativity to help them to go forward.
Absolutely. And again, finally, I'll say to everybody, creativity is about unleashing the potential of the mind to conceive new ideas. Innovation is about introducing change into existing systems and developing competencies to make new ideas viable. Entrepreneurs should join forces of combined entities and operate their business models across international boundaries and cultures, with their products and services providing opportunities and solutions. And the importance of the creative economy is about values-based relationships, collaboration, trust, cooperation. All those things are still important even in this space, and we spent quite a lot of time today talking about that. So I'd just like to thank everybody for listening on Fresh FM Radio London Live, Lighthouse Broadcasting, all the multiple channels, Facebook Live. Of course, we'll be sharing this across all our networks. Thank you very much, Carol Newman from IP Bridge and Dr. Laura Thompson from Lighthouse Broadcasting Company. Thank you and good night, and see you again definitely next year. World Intellectual Property Week next year. We will definitely start planning. So let's see you both soon. Thank you very much and good night.
Good night. Bye bye.